Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had to fight alone. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain did not wash the world clean. It only made the filth slicker. It fell in sheets, a relentless, gray curtain that turned the streets of the Kamino ward into a blurred watercolor painting of neon lights and misery. It drummed against the metal plating of Izuku Midoriya's iron saws, a rhythmic tapping that tried, and failed, to synchronize with the frantic, jackhammer beat of his heart. He stood atop a gargoyle perched on the edge of a crumbling municipal building, his breath hitching in his throat. Every exhale was a cloud of white mist that vanished instantly into the downpour. He was tired. No, tired was a word for people who had worked a long shift or run a marathon. Izuku was something else entirely. He was a hollowed-out vessel, a collection of cracked bones and fraying nerves held together by black tendrils of energy, and a promise he could no longer remember making. Danger. North. Moving fast. The fourth user's quirk, Danger Sense, didn't speak to him in words. It spoke in headaches. It was a stabbing needle behind his eyes, a persistent drone that had been screaming at him for weeks. But this time, the sensation wasn't the sharp, acidic spike of bloodlust. It was softer, duller. It felt like concern, and that terrified him more than any villain. You need to stop, Ninth, the first user's voice whispered in the back of his mind. It sounded like wind rushing through a tunnel. Your body is reaching its limit. The connective tissue in your left arm is micro-tearing again. I can keep going, Izuku rasped, his voice rough from disuse. He adjusted the tattered yellow cape, Gran Torino's cape, around his shoulders. It was heavy with water and mud. I have to find All for One. I have to find Shigaraki before he wakes up. You are not a machine, kid, came the rough, gravelly tone of Daigoro Banjo, the fifth user. You're running on fumes. You haven't slept more than 20 minutes in 3 days. You're gonna crash, and when you do, it won't be pretty. Quiet, Izuku muttered. He looked down at the street below. The civilians he had just saved from the dictator were huddled under an awning, looking up at him not with gratitude, but with wide, fearful eyes. They didn't see a hero. They saw a monster draped in shadows and green lightning, a creature that looked more like a Nomu than the smiling boy from the sports festival. Izuku turned away. It didn't matter what they saw. It only mattered that they were safe. Danger. Close. Here. The sensation spiked. Izuku spun around, black whip instantly uncoiling from his back like the strike of a cobra, ready to lash out. Deku! The voice cut through the rain and the static in his head. It was a voice he knew better than his own. It was warm, round, and usually full of laughter. Now, it was strained with desperation. Ochako Uraraka, floating above the street, released her gravity quirk and landed softly on the wet pavement 10 meters away. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, the shadows of the alleyways shifted. Tenya Ida, his armor gleaming under the streetlights. Shoto Todoroki, surrounded by a faint haze of heat that kept the rain at bay. Tsuyo Ajiri, clinging to the wall. Eijiro Kurishima, Momo Yayorozu, Fumikage Tokoemi, Class 1A. They were all here. Izuku took a step back, his iron soul screeching against the concrete. The sound was like a scream. Don't, Izuku said. The word came out as a growl, distorted by the mask that covered the lower half of his face. Don't come any closer. We're not here to fight you, Midoriya, Todoroki said, his voice calm, steady, the anchor in the storm. He stepped forward, palms open. We're here to bring you back. Endeavor told us everything. You're acting as bait. You're trying to draw All for One out alone. It's the only way, Izuku replied, his body tensing. The green lightning of One for All crackled around him, agitated and erratic. He wants me. If I stay at UA, if I stay with you, everyone dies. Don't you understand? Being near me is a death sentence. That is not for you to decide. Ida shouted, his hand chopping the air, sending raindrops flying. We are heroes, Midoriya. We are your classmates. We signed up for this danger. You do not have the right to shoulder the burden of the world alone. You don't know what he is, Izuku whispered, his eyes darting between them. He wasn't looking at their faces. He was checking their perimeters, scanning for snipers, for portals, for the decay that could turn them all to dust in a second. You didn't see Jaka City. You didn't feel him inside your head. We know you're scared, Deku-kun, Uraraka said, taking a step forward. Her eyes were wet, and not just from the rain. But look at you. You're covered in mud. You're bleeding. You look like you're crying. Izuku reached up to touch his mask. Was he? He couldn't feel it. He couldn't feel much of anything except the burning exhaustion and the crushing weight of responsibility. Get away from me, he warned, the black whip tendrils flaring out, creating a jagged barrier between him and his friends. I can't protect you if you're here. I can't think. We don't need protection. Bakugo's voice rang out. The crowd of students parted. Katsuki Bakugo walked through the center, his hero costume drenched, his gauntlets heavy at his sides. He didn't look angry. For the first time in Izuku's life, Katsuki Bakugo looked terrified. Kaken, Izuku breathed. You damn nerd, Bakugo gritted out, stopping 5 meters away. Do you think you're All Might? Do you think because you have his power, you have to make his mistakes? Look at yourself. You're wallowing in filth. You're pushing everyone away because you think you're some kind of noble sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice, Izuku argued, his voice cracking. It's necessity. All for One can track me. He can find me anywhere. If I go back to UA, he'll destroy the barrier. He'll kill Mom. He'll kill you, so let him try. Kirishima yelled, hardening his arms. We've gotten stronger too, man. We can fight him together. No! Izuku screamed. The force of his shout released a shockwave of wind pressure that knocked the rain backward, creating a momentary dry circle around him. The silence that followed was deafening. You can't fight him, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a haunting whisper. You can't fight a force of nature. He steals quirks. He breaks minds. If he touches you, he takes everything. Izuku looked down at his hands. Under the gloves, his scars were aching. The vestiges were silent now, watching. Waiting. They knew what was at stake. I'm doing this for you, Izuku said. Please. Just go home. Forget about me. We can't do that, Uraraka said softly. She activated her quirk, floating over the black whip barrier. We won't do that. Stop! Izuku yelled, panic flaring in his chest. Suddenly the class moved. It was a coordinated strike, drilled into them through months of hardship. Siro taped the surrounding buildings to create a net. Todoroki created an ice ramp to launch the others. Tokoyami's dark shadows stretched out to grab Izuku. They weren't attacking to hurt. They were attacking to capture. Izuku moved on instinct. Danger sense flared, not from them, but from the concept of being caught. If they caught him, they would drag him back to UA. If he went back to UA, the war would come to the doorstep of the innocent. He ducked under Dark Shadow's claw, using float to spin in the air. He kicked off the ice wall, shattering it. Smoke screen! The sixth user shouted. Purple smoke exploded from Izuku's body, filling the street instantly. It was thick, choking, obscuring all vision. Momo, infrared. Bakugo barked orders. Jiro, heartbeat. I have him! Jiro shouted, plugging her jacks into the concrete. He's moving left. He's trying to go vertical. Izuku launched himself upward, but a wall of acid blocked his path. Mina Ishido. He twisted in midair, using Black Whip to swing from a lamppost, only to find his path blocked by a massive wall of ice. They were hurting him. They knew him too well. Give it up, Midoriya! Ida's voice boomed as he engaged his Recipro Turbo, tearing through the smoke like a missile. He was fast. Faster than before. Izuku barely dodged, the wind of Ida's passing tearing the fabric of his cowl. He rolled across the wet roof of a delivery truck, gasping for air. They won't stop. They don't understand. He looked up. Through the thinning smoke, he saw them. They were closing in. A circle of friends. A circle of targets. Bakugo blasted through the smoke, propelling himself upward with explosions. He landed on the truck, facing Izuku. Stop running, Izuku! Bakugo yelled. He used the name. Not Deku. Izuku. Izuku froze. The use of his given name hit him harder than a howitzer impact. Bakugo took a step forward, his hands lowered. The rain plastered his spiky hair to his forehead. I know I've been terrible to you. I know I bullied you. I looked down on you because I was scared of your heart. I'm sorry. I am truly sorry for everything. The apology hung in the air, heavy and raw. It was the moment Izuku had wanted for 10 years. It was the closure of a wound that had festered since childhood, but it came at the wrong time. As Bakugo spoke, Izuku's danger sense didn't just spike, it shattered. A blinding white pain erupted in Izuku's skull. It wasn't a warning of an attack. It was a warning of consequence. He looked at Bakugo, but his mind didn't see the repentant boy in front of him. His exhausted, fractured mind superimposed an image over Bakugo's face. He saw Bakugo impaled by rivets. He saw Bakugo bleeding out on the ground during the war. He saw Gran Torino crushed. He saw Sir Night Eye cold and gray. If he is close to you, he dies. The thought wasn't his own. It felt like a whisper from All for One, echoing through the quirk connection. You are the plague, Izuku Midoriya. You are the curse. No, Izuku whispered, clutching his head. Izuku? Bakugo took a step closer, reaching out a hand. Take my hand. Let us help you clean up this mess. Izuku stared at the hand. It was an explosion waiting to happen. If he took that hand, he would drag Bakugo into the abyss with him. The panic set in. It wasn't the adrenaline of battle. It was the cold, frantic terror of a cornered animal. His breathing hyperventilated, ragged and shallow. Get back, Izuku choked out. I'm not leaving you, Bakugo said firmly. Get back! Something snapped inside Izuku. He didn't mean to do it. Or maybe some dark, pragmatic part of him did. He crouched low, energy flooding his legs. Fa gene built up in a fraction of a second, layering kinetic energy upon kinetic energy. He combined it with 45% of One for All. 6th. Maximum output. 9th. Wait. That's too much. The first user screamed in the vestige world. Izuku slammed his heel into the roof of the truck. Smash. It wasn't an attack on his friends. It was an attack on the environment. The truck collapsed instantly, flattened like a soda can. The shockwave was catastrophic. The concrete of the street buckled and shattered, sending massive slabs of pavement flying into the air. A wall of air pressure, solid as a brick wall, exploded outward. Bakugo was blown backward as if he weighed nothing. He crashed through a storefront window, the glass shattering around him. Uraraka and Azuri were swatted out of the air. Ida skidded backward, his armor scraping sparks against the ground until he hit a wall. The sheer volume of purple smoke that released was like a volcanic eruption, blanketing the entire city block in seconds. It was so thick it was suffocating. Izuku stood in the center of the crater he had made. The impact had jarred his bones. He felt a hairline fracture in his shin flare with agony, but the adrenaline masked it. He looked around. He couldn't see them, but he could hear them. Groans of pain. Coughing. Deku. Uraraka's voice was weak, coming from somewhere in the gray void. He had hurt them. He had actually hurt them. The realization made bile rise in his throat. He vomited onto the broken pavement, his body shuddering violently. See? The voice in his head whispered. You destroy everything you touch. I'm sorry, Izuku sobbed, the sound swallowed by the rain and the smoke. I'm so sorry. He looked at the gauntlet on his arm, the GPS tracker that All Might used to keep tabs on him. The lifeline to the few pro-heroes he still trusted. He ripped it off. He threw it onto the ground and brought his iron soul down on it, crushing the electronics into dust. The blinking light died. Midoriya! Todoroki's voice cut through the smoke, sounding closer. Where are you? Izuku didn't answer. He couldn't. If he spoke, he would break. If he stayed for one more second, he would surrender, and then everyone would die. He crouched. Black Whip shot out, not horizontally, but vertically. It latched onto the top of a skyscraper 5 blocks away. Fa Gene. 100%. The buildup of energy turned his legs into loaded springs. The green lightning turned white. With a sound like a thunderclap, Izuku launched himself into the sky. He moved so fast he was invisible to the naked eye, a blur of motion tearing through the rain. He ascended past the rooftops, past the smoke, into the cold, dark air above the city. Below him, the chaos of his departure was a small, gray smudge. He didn't look back. He couldn't look back. He swung through the concrete canyons of the city, moving faster than he ever had before. He didn't have a destination. He just needed distance. He needed to be where no one could find him, where no one could love him. Minutes turned into an hour. The city of Kamino faded behind him, replaced by the industrial outskirts of the prefecture. Finally, his legs gave out. Izuku crashed onto the roof of an abandoned textile factory, rolling across the gravel and tar. He came to a stop against the ventilation unit, gasping for air, his chest heaving so hard it felt like his ribs were cracking. He lay there in the rain, staring up at the black sky. He was alone, truly, finally alone. The silence in his head was terrifying. The vestiges were quiet, perhaps out of shock, or perhaps out of shame for what he had just done. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof pouch. Inside was a picture of his mother, Inko Midoriya. She was smiling, holding a young, quirkless Izuku in her arms. Raindrops hit the plastic, distorting her face. Izuku stared at it, trying to summon the feeling of her hug, the smell of Katsudan, the warmth of home. But all he could feel was the cold rain. All he could smell was ozone and smoke. I have to be the monster, he whispered to the empty roof. So you can be the heroes. He shoved the picture back into his pocket, forcing himself to stand on trembling legs. He couldn't stay here. He had to keep moving. All for One was out there. Shigaraki was out there. Izuku pulled his mask up, covering his face. The eyes of the suit glowed with a feral, emerald light. The hero Deku had died back in that alleyway, amidst the pleas of his friends. What remained was something else. A ghost. An instrument of violence. A titan holding up the sky, even as his own spine crumbled under the weight. Atlas was undone, and the world was falling. Izuku Midoriya turned his back on the light, and walked into the dark. Time had ceased to be a linear concept. It was no longer measured in hours or minutes, or even in the rising and setting of the sun. For Izuku Midoriya, time was measured in breaths. In heartbeats. In the throbbing ache of a shin fracture that refused to heal, and the persistent, low-grade fever that burned behind his eyes. 2 weeks. It had been 14 days since the rain-slicked confrontation in Kamino. 14 days since he had shattered the pavement, shattered his friend's trust, and shattered the last remnant of the boy who wanted to be a hero like All Might. Now, he was something else. Deep beneath the skeletal infrastructure of Mustafu, in the decommissioned maintenance tunnels of the subway system, the air was thick with the smell of stagnant water, rust, and rat droppings. It was a suffocating, heavy atmosphere that would have made a normal person gag, but Izuku barely registered it. His sensory input was filtered, prioritized, and discarded by a mind that had stripped itself down to pure survival instincts. He sat crouched on a rusted catwalk, 30 feet above a drainage canal. He wasn't sleeping. He didn't sleep anymore, not really. He drifted. He allowed his body to shut down non-essential functions for 15-minute intervals, a biological reboot that kept organ failure at bay but did nothing for the fraying wires of his sanity. Drip. 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 Condensation fell from a pipe above him, landing on the armored plating of his shoulder. The suit, once a vibrant, hopeful teal, was now a blackened, unrecognizable husk. The iron soles were chipped and scarred from 100 different impacts. The fabric was stained with mud, grease, and the dried blood of villains who hadn't learned to stay down. The yellow cape, Gran Torino's cape, hung around him like a shroud, tattered and heavy with grime. Ninth, a voice whispered. It was soft, maternal. Nana Shimura. Please. Your heart rate is erratic. You need to find a safe house. You need real food. Izuku didn't answer. He didn't move. In the darkness of the tunnel, the only light came from the faint, sickly emerald glow of his eyes beneath the metal mask. He's not listening, Nana, the gruff voice of the second user cut in. He's shut the door. He's listening to the gears turn, nothing else. He's going to die if he keeps this up, the fifth user, Daigoro, grumbled. Kid, listen to us. You're burning the candle at both ends, and you just threw the candle into a furnace. Izuku's gloved hand twitched. Danger sense hummed. It wasn't a spike, just the background radiation of a city infested with malice. Above him, miles of concrete and steel away, crimes were happening, people were hurting, but he couldn't save everyone. He had learned that the hard way. He could only hunt the wolves. He pulled a small, crumbled device from his belt. It was a burner phone he had swiped from a low-level thug 3 days ago. The screen was cracked, the battery at 12%. He tapped the screen with a trembling finger, pulling up the police band frequency. Reports of disturbance in District 4. Suspects identified as the Magnablade brothers, escaped Tartarus convicts, heavy casualties. Izuku stood up. The movement was accompanied by the sickening pop of his joints. He didn't stretch. He didn't groan. He simply shifted from stasis to motion. District 4, he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together. It was the first sound he had made in 24 hours. Izuku, wait, the first user pleaded. Your leg. The stress fractures widening. Black whip, Izuku muttered. Black tendrils erupted from his back, not with the fluid grace of a hero, but with the violent snap of a predator's strike. They lashed out, embedding themselves into the concrete ceiling of the tunnel. He didn't walk out. He launched himself into the darkness, a projectile of exhaustion and fury, hurtling toward the surface. Part 2, The Hunt. The night air of Mustafa was cold, but it felt scorching against Izuku's feverish skin. He moved across the rooftops of the industrial district, a silhouette against the smog-choked moon. He didn't run, he flowed. He used float to negate gravity, Black Whip to pull himself forward, and FA Gene to create explosive bursts of speed that allowed him to cross city blocks in seconds. To an observer, he was a blur. A glitch in the visual field. District 4 was a slum, a place where the streetlights had been shot out, and the police feared to tread even before the collapse of society. Now, in the era of anarchy, it was a hunting ground. Below him, amidst the wreckage of a looted electronics store, the Magnablade brothers were holding court. There were 3 of them, hulking men with quirks that allowed them to manipulate metal into jagged, spinning weapons. They had cornered a group of civilians, survivors trying to move supplies to a shelter. Drop the bags. The largest brother roared, turning a stop sign into a spinning buzzsaw. And maybe we don't turn you into confetti, the civilians were screaming. A man was clutching a bleeding arm. A child was crying, the sound sharp and piercing. Izuku landed on a gargoyle overlooking the alley. The sound of the child's cry hit him like a physical blow. It triggered a memory, a flash of a dorm room, a movie night, Eri smiling. He crushed the memory instantly. Sentiment was a distraction. Distraction meant death. Analyze. 3 targets. Kinetic metal manipulation. Mid-range threat. Hostages in close proximity. Smokescreen, the 6th user commanded. Full spread. Izuku didn't speak. He just acted. He released the quirk, flooding the alleyway below with a dense, purple fog. It rolled over the villains like a tsunami. What the hell? One of the brothers shouted, coughing. I can't see. Back to back. The leader yelled. It's a hero. Crush him. Izuku dropped into the smoke. He didn't land with a crash. He landed silently, his iron soles absorbing the impact. Danger sense. Left. Blade incoming. He ducked. A spinning metal disc sheared through the air where his head had been a microsecond before. Izuku moved. He didn't use 100%. He didn't need to. He used 45%, focused entirely into his legs. He appeared in front of the youngest brother like a phantom. The villain's eyes went wide. He didn't see All Might. He didn't see a symbol of peace. He saw a mask with glowing green eyes, surrounded by writhing black tentacles. He saw a nightmare. Ga! Izuku struck. A simple, brutal palm strike to the solar plexus. The villain's ribs cracked. The air left his lungs in a wheeze, and he folded, unconscious before he hit the ground. 1 down. Joey! The leader screamed. Where are you? Show yourself, coward! Metal debris began to swirl violently in the smoke, a tornado of shrapnel. Danger sense was screaming now, a constant, high-pitched whine. Behind. Right. Above. Izuku engaged gearshift. The world slowed down. The flying metal shards seemed to drift through the air like feathers. Izuku navigated through the storm, his body twisting in impossible angles. He grabbed a flying manhole cover with Black Whip and swung it around. He disengaged gearshift. Reality snapped back into hyperspeed. The manhole cover slammed into the second brother with the force of a wrecking ball. He went flying into a brick wall, slumped over, and didn't move. 2 down. The leader, realizing he was alone, panicked. He pulled all the metal in the alley towards him, creating a chaotic shield of scrap. Stay back. I'll kill them. I'll kill all of them. He turned his power toward the civilians huddled against the wall. A cluster of rebar spears aimed at the crying child. Izuku felt a cold, white rage ignite in his gut. It wasn't the hot passion of justice. It was the cold certainty of execution. He didn't shout smash. He didn't announce his presence. He simply was there. He burst through the metal shield, his skin hardened by the sheer density of one for all. Shrapnel cut his cheek, tore his suit, but he didn't slow down. He grabbed the villain by the throat with a hand wreathed in black energy. No. The villain gasped, looking into the eyes of the mask. You're that vigilante? You're the Deku. Izuku squeezed. Not enough to kill. Enough to terrify. Sleep, Izuku whispered. He slammed the villain into the pavement. The concrete cracked. The silence returned. The smoke began to clear. Izuku stood over the 3 unconscious bodies, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from a cut on his arm, mingling with the mud on his gloves. He turned to the civilians. He expected to see relief. He expected to see the smiles that All Might always talked about. The smiles that proved the day was saved. The father of the crying child looked up. He was trembling. He pulled his child tighter against his chest, shielding the boy's eyes. Please, the man sobbed, pressing himself into the brickwork. Please don't hurt us. Take the food. Take whatever you want. Just let us go. Izuku froze. The wind howled through the alley, catching his tattered cape. They weren't looking at a savior. They were looking at another villain. A stronger, scarier villain who had just dismantled 3 powerful men in under 30 seconds. To them, he was just another monster in a world gone mad. Izuku's voice failed him. He wanted to say I am a hero. He wanted to say it's okay now, but he looked at his reflection in a shattered storefront window. He looked like a demon. Go, Izuku rasped. Get to the shelter. 2 blocks east. The man didn't ask questions. He scrambled up, dragging his family with him, and ran. They ran from him as fast as they had run from the convicts. Izuku watched them go. You're losing them, kid, Daigoro said quietly in his mind. You're saving their lives, but you're losing their hearts. Hearts don't matter, Izuku muttered to himself, turning back to the darkness. Survival matters. If they fear me, maybe they'll stay off the streets. Maybe that keeps them safe. He launched himself back into the sky, leaving the unconscious villains for the police to scrape up. He couldn't stay. He had to keep moving. Part 3, The Phantom Pain. Hours passed. The adrenaline of the fight faded, replaced by the crushing weight of fatigue. Every muscle fiber in Izuku's body was screaming. The one for all quirk, usually a warm hum, felt like hot lead in his veins. He found himself in the warehouse district, near the docks. The smell of salt water mixed with the industrial rot. He landed on a crane, clutching his left arm. The scars were burning. The compression gauntlet he wore was damaging his skin, rubbing it raw, but he couldn't take it off. If he took it off, his arm might fall apart. Danger sense. It wasn't a spike. It was a pulse. A familiar aching pulse. Izuku stiffened. He knew this feeling. It wasn't malice. It was desperation. He looked down. Far below, walking through the desolate streets with a flashlight, was a skeletal figure. He wore an oversized trench coat that hung off his bony frame like a shroud. He moved with a limp, leaning heavily on a cane. All Might. Tashinori Yagi. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt a sudden, intense urge to jump down. To hug him. To ask him what to do. To be a student again. He found us, Nana whispered. Toshi. Don't look at him, the second user commanded sharply. If you go to him, AFO wins. He is being watched. He is always being watched. Izuku pressed himself flat against the rusted metal of the crane. He killed his own breathing, slowing his heart rate through sheer force of will. Down below, Toshinori stopped. He looked around, his hollow eyes scanning the rooftops. He looked so old. So frail. He held a plastic bag in his hand. A bento box. Young Midoriya! The shout was weak, carried away by the wind. I know you're here. I can feel it. Please! Come down! Izuku bit his lips so hard he tasted blood. Tears pricked his eyes, hot and stinging. I have Katsudon! All Might yelled, his voice cracking. It's cold, but we can heat it up. You need to eat. Please, my boy. You don't have to do this alone. I do, Izuku thought. I have to. Because if I come down there, Shigaraki will find you. And he will turn you to dust while I watch. Why won't you let me help you? All Might cried out, dropping to his knees. The flashlight rolled across the wet pavement. The greatest hero the world had ever known looked like a broken old man crying in the dark. I promise your mother. I promised her. The mention of his mother sent a jolt of agony through Izuku. Danger sense flared again. A low-level villain was approaching All Might's position from 3 blocks away. A scavenger. Izuku's eyes narrowed. He couldn't go down. But he could clear the path. He plucked a rusted bolt from the crane. He channeled a tiny percentage of FA gene into his thumb and forefinger. Flick. The bolt flew through the air faster than a bullet. 3 blocks away, it struck a transformer box next to the approaching scavenger. Sparks rained down, scaring the villain off. All Might flinched at the distant sound. He looked up, directly at the crane where Izuku was hiding. For a second, their gazes met. Or at least, Izuku felt like they did. All Might couldn't see him in the shadows, but he sensed him. Izuku? Toshinori whispered. Izuku turned away. He activated float and drifted silently backward into the fog. He left his mentor kneeling in the street, clutching a cold box of pork cutlet bowls. Abandoning All Might hurt more than breaking his limbs ever had. It felt like tearing out his own soul. But as he drifted away, he told himself the lie that had become his mantra. I am protecting him. My absence is my shield. Part 4, Hall of Mirrors. It was 4 a.m. The witching hour. Izuku had retreated to a narrow alleyway between 2 condemned high-rises. It was a tight squeeze, barely enough room to sit, but it was dry. He wedged himself behind a dumpster, hidden from the street. He needed calories. His body was cannibalizing itself. He reached into one of the pouches on his belt. Pouches that Hatsum had designed with such excitement, now covered in muck. He pulled out a protein bar. It was stale, the wrapper crinkled and faded. He lifted his mask slightly, just enough to expose his mouth. The air felt cold against his scarred skin. He took a bite. It tasted like chalk and chemicals. It was dry, hard to swallow without water. He chewed mechanically, staring at the brick wall opposite him. There was graffiti there. A crude drawing of All Might, but someone had sprayed a red X over it. Next to it, someone had written, "Where are the heroes?" I'm here, Izuku whispered to the wall. I'm trying. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. Izuku? The voice was clear. Warm. It smelled like fabric softener and cooked rice. Izuku's eyes snapped open. Standing at the end of the alley was a woman. She was short, with green hair tied back in a messy bun. She wore a pink apron. Mom? Izuku breathed. She smiled. It was the smile she used to give him when he came home from school. My baby? You look so tired. Come inside. Dinner is ready. Izuku scrambled to his feet. His fatigue vanished. Mom? How are you here? Is it safe? Did they move you? It's safe here, Izuku Inko said, holding out her arms. Just put down the heavy burden. You've done enough. Come give Mommy a hug. Izuku took a step forward, his hand reaching out. I missed you so much. I'm so sorry I left. I know, sweetie. I know. He took another step. He was only a few feet away. He could see the pattern on her apron, but then he blinked, and for a split second, her face changed. It wasn't Inko. It was Nana Shimura. Then it was Uraraka. Then it was just a blank, featureless oval. Mom? Izuku squinted. Mom, look at me. The figure stood there, but the features were melting. The eyes were sliding down the face. The smile became a gash. I can't see you, Izuku panicked. He rubbed his eyes violently with his dirty gloves. Why can't I see your face? Because you're forgetting, the figure said. The voice wasn't Inko's anymore. It was his own voice, echoing back at him. You're forgetting what you're fighting for. No! I'm fighting for everyone. You're fighting for a world you are no longer part of, the hallucination said. The figure dissolved into a swarm of rats that scurried into the sewers. Izuku stood alone in the alley, his hand outstretched to nothing. He fell back against the dumpster, hyperventilating. He frantically dug into his pocket for the photo, the waterproof pouch he had saved in the rain 2 weeks ago. He pulled it out. He shone the faint green light of his suit's eyes onto it. The water damage had worsened. The photo was warped. His mother's face was a smear of ink. He could see her hair, he could see her shape, but he couldn't see her eyes. He tried to summon her face in his mind. He tried to picture Inko Midoriya. He saw the back of her head. He saw her crying. He saw her worrying. But he couldn't construct her face. The details were gone, washed away by the adrenaline and the trauma. No, Izuku whimpered. He pressed the photo to his forehead. Please, no. Don't take this. Anything but this. He rocked back and forth, clutching the ruined photo. I can't remember, he sobbed. A dry, hacking sob. I can't remember what she looks like. Izuku, the first user said, his voice heavy with sorrow. You need to sleep. Your brain is misfiring. You're hallucinating. If I sleep, people die. If you don't sleep, you die. And then everyone dies. Izuku stared at the ground. A cockroach skittered across his boot. He felt a terrifying clarity wash over him. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness. The vessel was cracking, but the mission remained. If he couldn't be Izuku Midoriya, the boy who loved his mom, the boy who loved Katsudan, the boy who loved his friends, then he wouldn't be. He would just be the quirk. He would be the vessel. He would be the ninth holder. He put the ruined photo back in his pocket. He finished the protein bar, swallowing the dry lumps without chewing. He stood up. He adjusted his mask. He tightened the straps of his gauntlets. He checked the tension in his iron soles. Is anyone nearby? He asked the fourth user internally. 2 blocks over, the fourth user replied, resigned. Mugging in progress. Let's go. Izuku Midoriya didn't walk out of the alley. The ghost of Mustafa did. He launched himself onto the fire escape, scaling the building with the silent, terrifying grace of a spider. He didn't look back at the graffiti. He didn't look back at the spot where he thought he saw his mother. He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the sun was threatening to rise. He hated the sun. The sun meant people could see him. The sun meant he had to hide. He preferred the dark. In the dark, he was just a pair of glowing eyes and a whip of black energy. In the dark, he didn't have to be human. As he leapt across the gap between buildings, a silhouette against the graying dawn, the city below stirred. They woke up in fear, checking their locks, whispering rumors of the vigilante who looked like a villain. Atlas was still holding the sky, but his shoulders were numb. He no longer felt the weight. He no longer felt anything at all. The realm of One for All was usually a place of ethereal stillness, a void of shifting auroras and solid ground amidst a sea of stars. But lately, the void had become a riot. It was no longer a sanctuary, it was a cage. Inside the metaphysical construct of the quirk, the vestiges were in a state of civil war. He's ignoring the pain receptors again. Nana Shimura's voice was a frantic shriek that vibrated through the mist. She stood near the throne of the first user, her hands gripping her cape, her face twisted in a mask of maternal agony. Yoichi, look at the biofeedback. His cortisol levels are lethal. His left femur has a hairline fracture that he hasn't even acknowledged. Yoichi Shigaraki, the first user, sat on his chair, looking gaunt and haunted. He stared into the swirling smoke that represented the window to the outside world, Izuku's eyes. I know, Nana. I know, but he isn't listening. Then make him listen, Nana yelled, turning to the others. We are part of his soul. We can force a shutdown. We can induce narcolepsy, and leave him unconscious in a sewer? The second user leaned against a pillar of solidified light, his arms crossed. His face was scarred, his eyes cold and hard like flint. That's a death sentence. The boy is in enemy territory. If he sleeps, he dies. He is dying now. Daigoro Banjo V roared, slamming a spectral fist into his palm. He's just doing it slowly. Kid's running on spite and adrenaline. He needs a hospital, not a war zone. He is doing what is necessary, the third user muttered, though he looked uneasy. He is clearing the board. He is mutilating himself. Nana countered. Outside, in the physical world, Izuku Midoriya was crouching on a rusted I-beam in the dark, but inside, the noise was deafening. It wasn't just their voices, it was their emotions. One for all was a power of connection. It linked hearts. It shared will. But right now, that connection was a curse. Izuku could feel Nana's weeping anxiety like a wet blanket suffocating his lungs. He could feel Banjo's frustration like a hot coal in his gut. He could feel the second's cold pragmatism like a knife in his spine. It was noise. Constant, overlapping, discordant noise. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut in the real world, gritting his teeth. Quiet, he thought. Please, just be quiet. We cannot be quiet when you are destroying yourself. 9th. The fourth user, Haikyuu Shinomori, projected his thoughts directly into the auditory center of the quirk. My danger sense is overwhelmed because you are the source of the danger. Stop it, Izuku whispered. We love you, kid, Banjo said, softer this time. That's why we're screaming. You gotta pull back. Pull back? Izuku's internal voice was icy. Pull back to where? To UA? So Shigaraki can decay the school? So AFO can steal your quirks? To live to fight another day? Nana pleaded. There is no other day, Izuku snapped. The mental landscape shook. The vestiges stumbled as the ground beneath them trembled with the force of Izuku's suppression. He was pushing them down. He was treating the spirits of the past not as mentors, but as unruly software trying to override the operator. I need the quirks, Izuku projected, his thought voice echoing like thunder in the void. I need Black Whip. I need Float. I need Danger Sense. I need Smokescreen. I need FA Gene. I need Gearshift. He paused, and the void grew cold. I don't need you. The silence that followed was shocked, heavy, and brief. You don't mean that, Yoichi whispered. I can't think, Izuku hissed. You're too loud. You're lagging me. Lagging? The second user raised an eyebrow, intrigued and disturbed. He views his own conscience as latency. I'm going in, Izuku announced. If you distract me, I miss a step. If I miss a step, I die. If I die, the world ends. So shut up. He severed the link. Not completely. He couldn't remove them entirely, but he slammed a mental door. The voices became muffled, like people shouting from underwater. Izuku Midoriya opened his eyes. The green glow illuminated the damp, peeling paint of the warehouse wall. The noise was gone. The silence of the real world rushed in, the hum of electricity, the drip of water, the scuff of boots. He stood up. He felt lighter. Colder but lighter. Part 2, The Factory of Nightmares. The location was a pharmaceutical distribution center in the mountains of Gifu Prefecture. On paper, it was abandoned. According to the data Izuku had ripped from the mainframe of a lesser villain's hideout 2 days ago, it was active. It was a tributary. A manufacturing plant for the high-end Noma regeneration cells. Izuku didn't scout the perimeter. He didn't call Endeavor. He didn't wait for backup. He stood on the skylight, looking down into the gloom. Danger sense buzzed at the base of his skull. It wasn't a warning of immediate attack. It was a warning of presence. There were things down there. Things that shouldn't exist. F.A. Gene. Load. He bent his knees, building the kinetic charge. He didn't pump his legs. He simply vibrated his muscles at a microscopic frequency, a trick he'd figured out to minimize movement. Smash. He shattered the glass. Izuku fell 60 feet. As he descended, he didn't use float. He used gravity as a weapon. He spun, Black Whip lashing out to grab a heavy crate of machinery suspended by a chain. He yanked it down with him. He landed in a crouch. The impact pulverized the concrete floor. A split second later, the crate crashed down beside him, creating a massive distraction. Guards, human sympathizers armed with quirk-enhanced rifles, swarmed from the shadows. Intruder! Open fire! Bullets hailed toward the cloud of dust. Smokescreen. The purple fog hissed out, filling the room instantly. It mixed with the dust, creating an opaque blindness. Izuku moved. He was a shark in dark water. He didn't engage the guards directly. He didn't waste time knocking them out individually. He targeted their weapons. Black whip snapped out, wrapping around the barrel of a rifle. Yank. The gun flew into the darkness. A scream of broken fingers. Snap. Another whip caught a guard's ankle. Pull. The guard was dragged into the ceiling rafters, left hanging by his leg, screaming in terror. Izuku moved through the smoke with danger sense as his radar. He didn't need to see. He felt the intent, malice on the left. He ducked. A knife slashed the air. Izuku countered with a low sweep, shattering the attacker's knee. The sound was a wet crunch. Malice on the right. Projectile. He engaged gearshift, low gear. He swatted the bullet out of the air with the back of his hand, the iron gauntlet deflecting the lead. He walked through the chaos untouched. He reached the heavy blast doors at the end of the loading bay. They were reinforced steel, designed to hold back rampaging monsters. Izuku didn't look for a keypad. He placed both hands on the metal, one for all. 45%. The metal groaned. It shrieked. Then, with a sound like a bomb going off, the doors buckled inward. They flew off their hinges, tumbling down the hallway beyond. Izuku stepped through the breach. The hallway was sterile white, lit by flickering fluorescent strips. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic. And rot. Lined along the walls were tanks. Massive, cylindrical glass tubes filled with green fluid. Floating inside were pieces, torso of a man, head of a woman, arms that were too long, fingers that were too many, brains with eyes. Izuku walked past them. He didn't vomit. He didn't cry. He looked at them with the detached analysis of a coroner. Regeneration tanks. They're growing them in parts and stitching them together. Ninth, this is... Nana's voice tried to break through the barrier he had erected. These people. Quiet, Izuku thought, reinforcing the mental wall. They aren't people anymore. They are biology. Focus. He reached the central lab. It was a cavernous space dominated by a massive vat in the center. Standing in front of the vat was a creature. It wasn't a high-end. Not yet. It was a near high-end. It had the black skin, the exposed brain, the beak of a bird. But it was lopsided. One arm was massive, the other atrophied. It was twitching, and beside it stood a man in a white lab coat. He was holding a tablet, looking terrified. Kill him! The scientist shrieked, pointing at Izuku. Beta, kill the intruder! The Noma roared. It was a sound that vibrated in the teeth. Izuku didn't flinch. He adjusted his gloves. Target acquired, he whispered. Part 3, the meat grinder. The Noma moved with blinding speed. It possessed a speed enhancement quirk, likely stolen from a pro-hero years ago. It closed the distance of 50 meters in a blink. Its massive claws swung for Izuku's head. Izuku didn't dodge. He caught the fist. The impact shockwave blew the glass out of the surrounding tanks, spilling fluid and body parts onto the floor. The floor tiles cracked in a spiderweb pattern under Izuku's boots. Izuku's arm trembled. The Noma was strong. Physically, it rivaled All Might in his weakened state. Strength quirk, Izuku analyzed aloud, his voice flat. Speed quirk. Likely shock absorption. The Noma's beak opened, revealing rows of serrated teeth. It tried to bite Izuku's face. Izuku triggered Black Whip from his chest. The tendrils shot into the Noma's open mouth, gagging it. Disgusting, Izuku muttered. He twisted his hips and threw the creature. The Noma crashed into a bank of computers, sparking an electrical fire, but it bounced back instantly. It had regeneration. The burns healed in seconds. It screeched and launched a barrage of attacks. This time, Izuku met violence with violence. He moved into the fray. He stopped evading. Evasion wasted time. he took the hits. A claw raked across his chest, tearing the Gran Torino cape and slicing through the nanoweave of his suit. Blood sprayed. Izuku ignored it. He delivered a Manchester smash to the Noma's skull. The creature's head deformed, then snapped back. The Noma kicked Izuku in the ribs. Crack. Izuku felt the bone give. A sharp, hot needle of pain pierced his lung. He ignored it. Yoichi! Nana screamed from behind the mental door. He's trading blows. He's letting himself get hit to land counters. Stop him! We can't! Yoichi yelled back. He's locked us out of the motor controls. In the lab, the fight had become a blur of blood and black lightning. Izuku was faster, but the Noma was relentless. It didn't feel pain. Neither do I, Izuku thought. He jumped, spinning in the air. The Noma extended its arm, turning it into a spear of bone. It aimed for Izuku's heart. Danger sense flared. Izuku shifted his body 2 inches. The bone spear pierced his left shoulder, going clean through. He didn't scream. He didn't even grunt. He clamped his muscle around the bone spear, trapping the Noma. Got you, he whispered. The Noma tried to pull back, but Izuku held firm. Blood poured from his shoulder, soaking his suit, but his grip was iron. He placed his right hand on the Noma's exposed brain. Fa gene. 100%. Impact. Boom. The force was directional. It didn't explode outward. It drove downward. The Noma's head was obliterated. Not just crushed, erased. The shockwave traveled down the creature's spine, turning its nervous system to jelly. The body went limp. Izuku shoved the corpse away, sliding off the bone spear that was stuck in his shoulder. He staggered. The room spun. The floor was slick with green fluid and red blood. He reached up and gripped the bone spear still protruding from his deltoid. Don't do it! The 5th user yelled in his head. Leave it in! You'll bleed out. Izuku yanked it out. A torrent of blood followed. Izuku immediately cauterized the wound using the heat of 1 for all at 100% friction against his glove, pressing it into the hole. The smell of burning flesh, his own flesh, filled the room. He swayed, his vision graying at the edges. But he didn't fall. He turned his glowing green eyes toward the scientist, who was cowering under a desk. Part 4, The Interrogation. Izuku walked toward the scientist. His footsteps were heavy, wet slaps against the tile. He looked like a revenant, covered in gore, smoke rising from his shoulder, his suit in tatters, his eyes burning. He ripped the desk away with one hand, tossing it across the room. The scientist, a man named Dr. Tsubasa, a relative of the doctor who stole the wings from a child years ago, scrambled backward until he hit the wall. Stay back! Tsubasa shrieked. I'm a civilian! You can't hurt me! Heroes don't hurt unarmed men. Izuku stopped. He loomed over the man. Hero? Izuku asked. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. He crouched down, bringing his face level with the doctor's. I am looking for Tamura Shigaraki, Izuku said. I am looking for the main body. I don't know. Tsubasa stammered. I just grow the cells. I just handle the logistics. You're lying, Izuku said. Danger sense didn't detect lies, but Izuku had spent months studying the micro-expressions of villains. The twitch of the eye. The sweat on the brow. I swear! Please! Take me to the police. I'll confess everything to the police. The police would take days to process him. They would follow procedure. Lawyers would get involved. Time would be wasted. Izuku didn't have time. Where is he? Izuku asked again. I told you, I don't know. Izuku reached out. Black whip formed a small, precise tendril. It wrapped around the doctor's index finger. The police aren't here, Izuku whispered. All Might isn't here. He applied pressure. Snap! The doctor screamed. It was a high, thin sound. That was the index, Izuku said calmly. I have 9 more. And then toes. And then ribs. Inside the vestige world, the reaction was explosive. No! All Might's vestige, the weak, flame-like ghost, flickered violently. Midoriya, stop! Ida's voice seemed to echo from a memory, but it was drowned out. This is torture! Nana screamed. You are becoming what we fight. You are becoming AFO. Izuku heard them. The muffled shouts behind the door. They don't understand, he told himself. They think this is a game. They think we can win with clean hands. Where is Shigaraki? Izuku asked, tightening the whip around the middle finger. Okay. Okay. The doctor was hyperventilating, mucus running down his face. He's being moved. He's in a mobile fortress. A converted tanker ship off the coast of Niigata. Coordinates? I don't have them. They change every hour. But there's a transponder. In the server room. It tracks the shipment. Izuku released the finger. The doctor collapsed, cradling his hand, sobbing. Izuku stood up. He walked to the server banks. He ripped the hard drive out of the main console. He looked back at the doctor. If you move before the police arrive, Izuku said, I will find you. He turned to leave. You're crazy! The doctor yelled after him, clutching his broken finger. You're not a hero. You're a villain. You're just another villain. Izuku paused at the door. He looked at his reflection in the steel. The blood. The glowing eyes. The darkness. Maybe, he said. Part 5, the silence. He exited the warehouse into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving a heavy mist clinging to the mountains. Izuku walked into the forest, seeking cover. He found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive cedar tree. He sat down. The pain rushed back in. The shoulder wound throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The broken rib grated with every breath. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing him into the dirt. But the noise in his head was getting louder. The vestiges were revolting. Open this door, ninth. The second user was pounding on the metaphysical barrier. We need to talk. Now. You crossed the line, Yoichi said, his voice trembling with disappointment. Torture? Is that who we are? You scared him, Banjo said. You didn't just scare him, you broke him. That's not how a symbol of peace acts. I am not the symbol of peace, Izuku muttered aloud, clutching his head. I am the Atlas. You are a child. Nana wept. Let us in. Let us help you carry this. No, Izuku said. You make me hesitate. You made me pause. If I hadn't paused, I wouldn't have taken that hit to the shoulder. You took that hit because you're reckless. I took it because I was listening to you. Izuku shouted into the empty forest. He closed his eyes. He went deep into the core of One for All. He visualized the door. It was a heavy vault door. Behind it, the 7 spirits were clamoring. He visualized welding it shut. Izuku, don't! Yoichi pleaded. If you shut us out completely, you lose our guidance. You lose the wisdom of the past. The past is dead, Izuku said cold. The future is dying. I am the only one in the present. He focused all his will. All his mental fortitude. Silence. He pushed the concept of silence onto the quirk. He wrapped the vestiges in a cocoon of static. He dampened their voices. He turned down the volume until they were nothing but a low hum in the background. Izuku. Nana's voice faded. Please, then nothing. The buzzing stopped. The phantom sensation stopped. The emotional bleed-through stopped. Izuku opened his eyes. It was quiet. For the first time in a year, his mind was entirely his own. There was no counsel. No encouragement. No scolding. Just him. He looked at his hand. He flexed his fingers. He felt the power of One for All flowing through him. Raw, unfiltered, efficient. Without the personalities attached to the quirks, they felt cleaner. Black Whip was just energy. Float was just physics. Danger Sense was just data. He was no longer a vessel for 8 ghosts. He was a singular weapon. He pulled a bandage from his pouch and began to wrap his shoulder. His movements were precise, robotic. He checked the hard drive. He had a location. Niigata. He stood up. He didn't feel lonely. Loneliness required a desire for company. He felt nothing. He was the Atlas undone. He had shrugged off the world of expectations, the world of morals, the world of friends and mentors. He was finally light enough to fly. He launched himself into the air, a green streak cutting through the night, heading north. Heading toward the sea. Heading toward the end of all things. The Kanagawa Prefecture Evacuation Zone, formerly known as the bustling residential district of Kawasaki, was burning. It wasn't the clean, purifying fire of a hearth, nor the controlled burn of a villain takedown. It was a chaotic, choking inferno that turned the night sky a bruised purple. Sirens wailed, a discordant symphony that failed to drown out the deeper, more terrifying sound, the rhythmic, wet thudding of something massive moving through the smoke. Enji Todoroki, Endeavor, stood atop the wreckage of a highway overpass, his flames guttering against the wind. Sweat and soot streaked his face. His scar throbbed, a phantom reminder of Dabi, of the past, of sins that refused to stay buried. Status. He barked into his comms. Perimeter is failing, number 1. Hawk's voice came back, strained and breathless. This thing, it's not mindless. It's hurting us. Genist, I have secured the civilian corridor in Sector 4, Best Genist replied, his voice calm but tight. But the fibers of reality are fraying, Endeavor. This Noma possesses a vibration quirk. It is liquefying the structural integrity of the high-rises. If we do not terminate it within 5 minutes, the Nakahara Tower collapses. There are 200 civilians still inside. Endeavor grit his teeth. Burn it down. He launched himself from the overpass, a comet of hellfire. The enemy waited in the center of the intersection. It was a high-end Nomu, though the intelligence division had designated it Titan class. It stood 12 feet tall, its skin a mottled gray carapace. It had no eyes, only a row of sensory pits along its elongated skull. Its arms were massive pistons, and with every step, the ground rippled like water. Heroes, the Noma gurgled. Its voice sounded like grinding stones. The doctor said, "Test the heroes." Endeavor didn't parley. He unleashed a jet burn, a concentrated beam of white-hot fire aimed at the creature's exposed brain. The Noma didn't dodge. It opened its mouth and screamed. The sound wasn't just noise. It was a physical wall of force. A sonic boom amplified by a quirk. It hit Endeavor's fire, scattering the flames into harmless sparks. The shockwave continued, slamming into Endeavor's chest. The number 1 hero was swatting out of the sky like a fly. He crashed through a storefront, tumbling through shelves of merchandise. Endeavor! Hawks dived, his red feathers shooting out to pin the Noma's limbs. Too slow, bird, the Noma laughed. It slammed its fists into the asphalt. Liquefaction. The street turned into quicksand. The feathers lost their purchase. The ground rippled outward, undermining the foundations of the Nakahara Tower nearby. The massive building groaned. Glass shattered from the 30th floor, raining down like diamonds. It's going to fall! Genus shouted, using cables to try and brace the massive structure, a spider trying to hold back a falling tree. I cannot hold this weight. Endeavor clawed his way out of the rubble. He was overheating. His vision was blurry. Hawks, get the people out. There's no time. Hawks yelled, banking hard to avoid a slab of concrete. We need a heavy hitter. We need. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The air pressure in the district suddenly dropped. The smoke swirling around the burning buildings was sucked inward, toward a single point in the sky. Danger sense didn't exist for the heroes, yet every hair on their bodies stood up. It was a primal recognition of a predator entering the ecosystem. A green star appeared in the smoke. Part 2, the variable. Izuku Midoriya did not feel the heat of the fire. He did not hear the sirens. Inside his mind, there was only the beautiful, terrifying silence he had manufactured. The vestiges were muted, their screams of caution reduced to white noise behind a locked door. Target acquired, his mind processed. High-end Nomu. Vibration/liquefaction quirk. High threat to structural stability. He was falling from 3,000 feet. He had used float to ascend, and now he was using gravity to become a kinetic missile. Gearshift. Overdrive. The world slowed. The flames froze in place. The falling glass hung suspended in the air. Izuku adjusted his trajectory. He didn't care about the heroes. They were variables in the equation, nothing more. If they got in the way, they were obstacles. He disengaged gearshift at the moment of impact. Crack. He didn't hit the ground. He hit the Nomu. He slammed into the creature's back with the force of a meteor. The impact cratered the liquefied street, sending a tsunami of molten asphalt and concrete flying outward. The Nomu shrieked, not in attack, but in pain. Its spine shattered instantly. Izuku didn't stop. He rolled off the creature, his movements jerky and feral. He was covered in grime, his suit torn, the blood from his shoulder wound dried into a black crust on his arm. He stood up. Green lightning arced violently around him, lashing out at the environment, scorching the ground. Deku? Hawks hovered 10 meters away, eyes wide. Izuku didn't look at him. He looked at the Nomu. The creature was already healing. The spine snapped back into place with a sickening crunch. The gray skin knit together. "You," the Nomu growled, turning to face the small, tattered figure. "The master wants you. You are in the way," Izuku said. His voice was unrecognizable. It was devoid of inflection, devoid of the nervous stammer or the determined shout. It was dead. The Nomu lunged. Izuku vanished. He used Black Whip to slingshot himself under the Nomu's guard. He delivered a Wyoming smash to the creature's gut. The shockwave blew a hole through the monster's torso, but the Nomu countered, swinging a massive arm. Izuku ducked, but the wind pressure alone sent him skidding. Analysis. Regeneration speed is 400% faster than Hosu variants. Brain is protected by subcutaneous plating. Need maximum output. He glanced at the Nakahara Tower. The building was leaning. The Nomu's vibration quirk had destabilized the bedrock. If it uses the quirk again, the building falls, Best Jeanist shouted from the perimeter. "Midoriya! Draw it away! Draw it to the waterfront," Izuku calculated. Distance to waterfront, 2.4 kilometers. Nomu's speed, Mach 1.5. Probability of drawing aggro without engaging, low. Probability of Nomu triggering quake during transit, 100%. "No," Izuku muttered. "What?" Jeanist yelled. "It ends here." Izuku crouched. The green lightning turned a blinding, sterile white. "Midoriya, don't!" Hawks realized what he was doing. The structure is compromised. If you use 100% here, the shockwave will. Fa Jean. Load. The Nomu roared and slammed its hands together, preparing a massive sonic blast to finish off the tower. Izuku didn't hesitate. He didn't look for a safe angle. There was no safe angle. There was only the kill. He launched himself. Full 100%. Manchester smash. He spun in the air, bringing his heel down on the Nomu's head with apocalyptic force. The impact was absolute. The Nomu's head didn't just break, it atomized. The force traveled down its body, liquefying its organs, shattering every bone, and driving the remains deep into the earth. But physics was a cruel mistress. The shockwave didn't stop at the Nomu. It exploded outward. The liquefied ground rippled violently. The foundations of the Nakahara Tower, already hanging by a thread, shattered. The blast of wind pressure hit the base of the building. With a groan that sounded like the earth dying, the 30-story tower tilted and fell. Part 3, The Shadow of Atlas. "Jeanist!" Endeavor screamed. Best Jeanist was already moving. He threw every fiber he had, creating a massive net of cables to catch the falling debris. Hawks flew faster than he ever had, diving into the falling masonry to grab civilians who were tumbling out of the windows. But the building was too heavy. The tower collapsed onto the adjacent evacuation center, the one Endeavor had just cleared. Dust billowed up, a cloud that swallowed the city block. The sound was deafening, a roar of destruction that lasted for 10 agonizing seconds. Then silence. Izuku stood in the center of the crater where the Nomu used to be. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving. The Nomu was dead. A smear of gray paste. Threat neutralized. He looked up. Through the clearing dust, he saw the ruin. The tower lay across the street like a fallen giant. Is everyone? Hawks coughed, emerging from the dust, dragging a family of 3. "Jeanist? Endeavor? I am here." Jeanist's voice was weak. He was buried up to his waist in rubble, holding up a massive slab of concrete with steel cables. Underneath the slab were a dozen civilians. Endeavor pulled himself from a pile of bricks. He was bleeding from a head wound. He looked at the destruction. He looked at the dead Nomu, and then he looked at Izuku. The number 1 hero's face wasn't filled with gratitude. It was filled with horror. "You!" Endeavor wheezed, stumbling forward. "You dropped a building on us." Izuku turned slowly. The eyes of his mask glowed through the gloom. "The threat is eliminated," Izuku said. "There were people in there." Hawk shouted, his usual cool demeanor gone. He landed, wings flared aggressively. Midoriya! We told you to draw it away. You compromised the structural integrity. It was going to destroy the foundation anyway, Izuku stated. Calculated risk. Immediate termination prevented further casualties. Calculated risk? Endeavor roared. Flames licked at his beard. This isn't math, boy. This is human life. You don't gamble with it. You did, Izuku replied cold. You gambled with your family. You gambled with Dabi. Endeavor froze. The words hit him harder than the Noma's punch. Don't do this, Hawks warned, stepping between them. He held up a feather blade. Deku. Stand down. You're exhausted. You're not thinking straight. Come with us. We can fix this. Fix? Izuku tilted his head. You can't fix anything. You're too slow. You're too soft. Midoriya, Genis called out, straining against the weight of the concrete. Please. Look at yourself. You are covered in blood. You are alone. This path, it only leads to madness. Izuku looked at his hands. They were trembling. Not from fear, but from the raw energy coursing through his nerves. Danger sense spiked. Not from a villain. From Hawks. Hawks was tensing his leg muscles. He was preparing to subdue Izuku. To capture him. To take him back to UA. If I go back, they die. If I stay, I hunt. I can't go back, Izuku whispered. We can't let you leave, Hawks said, his voice dropping to a serious, lethal tone. You're a danger to yourself and others. Look at this mess. You're acting like a villain, Deku. The word hung in the air. Villain. Something snapped behind the locked door in Izuku's mind. A muffled cry from Nana Shimura. No! Don't call him that. But Izuku didn't hear her. He only heard the threat. I am not a villain, Izuku said, the black tendrils of whip rising from his back like a halo of darkness. I am the solution. Take him. Endeavor ordered. Hawks moved. He was the fastest hero. He closed the gap in a fraction of a second, his feather blade aiming for the gaps in Izuku's armor, intending to sever the motor nerves and immobilize him. But Izuku had the second user. Gear shift. Low gear. To Hawks, Izuku didn't just move fast. He warped. One moment, Izuku was in front of him. The next, Izuku was above him. Izuku didn't punch. He spun, his iron soul catching the primary flight feathers of Hawk's left wing. Snap. It wasn't a bone breaking. It was the sound of the stiff, aerodynamic feathers shearing under the force. Hawks cried out, spinning out of control and crashing into the pavement. Endeavor unleashed a torrent of fire. Flash fire fist. Izuku didn't dodge. He used Black Whip to rip a massive chunk of the fallen building, a piece of wall weighing 2 tons, and slammed it down in front of him as a shield. The fire washed over the concrete, melting it to slag, but Izuku was gone. He moved through the smoke, a ghost in the machine. Best Genis tried to bind him with the fibers of his own clothes. Midoriya! Stop! Izuku used F.A. Gene. He flicked a finger. The air pressure bullet severed the denim threads before they could tighten. He landed on the highest remaining peak of the rubble. The rain began to fall again, mixing with the smoke and the dust, creating a black sludge that coated everything. The top 3 heroes were battered, broken, and beaten. Not by Shigaraki. Not by All for One. But by the successor of All Might. Don't follow me, Izuku said. His voice was amplified by the silence of the aftermath. I will handle Shigaraki. You just clean up the mess. Izuku! Endeavor yelled, reaching out a hand wreathed in dying embers. Izuku turned his back. Smoke. A massive explosion of purple fog engulfed the area, thicker than ever before. When the wind finally cleared it away, the vigilante was gone. Part 4. The Court of Public Opinion. Breaking news. The Chirin scrolled across the screens of millions of devices across Japan. In evacuation shelters, in hidden basements, and in the secure dorms of UA High School, the world watched. The footage was shaky. It had been filmed by a news helicopter that had braved the airspace restrictions. It showed the collapse of the Nakahara Tower. It showed the dust cloud. And then, it showed the confrontation. The audio was grainy, but the images were clear. The image of Deku, the boy who once broke his bones to save a single person, standing over a fallen Hawks. The image of Deku smashing a building section to block Endeavor. The image of Deku fleeing the scene, leaving the top heroes buried in rubble. In the UA common room, silence reigned. Mina Ashido had her hands over her mouth. Tsuya Ajiri was crying silently. Bakugo stood in front of the TV, his hands clenched so tight his palms were bleeding. That idiot, Bakugo whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. That absolute, moronic idiot. He attacked Hawks, Kaminari said, his voice hollow. He clipped his wings. Did you see that? He actually attacked him. He's lost it, Mineta squeaked, hiding behind the sofa. He's gone crazy. He hasn't gone crazy. Uraraka shouted, standing up. Her eyes were red but fierce. He's desperate. Can't you see? He thinks he has to do this. It doesn't matter what he thinks, Uraraka, Ida said solemnly, adjusting his glasses. His reflection in the lenses was dark. Look at the news ticker. Uraraka looked. Rogue hero? DKU attacks top pros after causing massive collateral damage. Public Safety Commission issues arrest warrant for Izuku Midoriya. Is the symbol of peace dead? They're turning on him, Todoroki said quietly. The narrative is shifting. People are scared. They don't want a hero who destroys cities to save them. They want safety. And Midoriya looks like danger. On the screen, a reporter was interviewing a civilian from the evacuation zone. The man was covered in dust, bleeding from a head wound. He saved us from the monster, the man said, coughing. But then, he looked at us. And his eyes, there was nothing there. Just lights. I've never been more scared of a villain in my life. And he's supposed to be the good guy. The feed cut to a pundit arguing that Deku was a loose cannon weaponized by UA. Bakugo turned away from the screen. He's doing exactly what All for One wants. He's isolating himself. He's making himself the enemy so no one will get close to him. We have to go get him, Kurishima said, slamming his fists together. Before the pros hurt him. Before he hurts someone else. We can't, Aizawa's voice came from the doorway. The teacher looked worse than they had ever seen him. He was leaning on a crutch, his eye patch stark against his pale skin. Sensei, Uraraka pleaded. The Public Safety Commission has designated him a hostile vigilance threat, Aizawa said, his voice raspy. If you intervene, you will be arrested. Or worse. Midoriya might engage you like he did Hawks, so we just watch him die. Bakugo snarled. No, Aizawa said. He looked at the TV, where a freeze frame of Izuku's glowing, tattered form was displayed. We watch him break, and we pray that when the pieces fall, there's enough left to put back together. Part 5, The Lonely Peak. Miles away, atop a radio tower overlooking the ruined district, Izuku sat. He was shivering. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard. His hands shook uncontrollably as he tried to adjust the compression gauntlet on his left arm. He pulled up the holographic feed from his mask. He saw the news reports. He saw the arrest warrant, hostile threat, villain-like behavior, dangerous. He swiped the hologram away. It's better this way, he whispered to the wind. Inside the quiet void of his mind, a single sound managed to penetrate the barrier he had erected. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling. It was the sensation of the second user, nodding, acceptance. Izuku looked down at the city lights. They seemed so far away. He felt like an alien looking down at a planet he didn't belong to. He had saved the city from the Noma. He had stopped the destruction, but he had lost the people. I don't need them to love me, Izuku said, his voice cracking. I just need them to survive. He stood up. The wind caught his tattered yellow cape, whipping it around him like a broken wing. Danger sense remained silent. For now, but he knew it wouldn't last. All for One was watching. The Demon King was laughing. Izuku turned away from the lights of civilization and looked toward the dark expanse of the wilderness. Next, he said. He leapt into the night, a fallen star burning out as it fell.